Hello, welcome. Thank you for joining me. I'm Deborah Leon, and today I'm going to be just focusing a little bit on forward folds and what that means. So often when we're told to forward fold, we're told to forward fold from the hip joint and not the low back, and for some of us it's not exactly clear. So what I'm going to go through today is understanding a little bit about what creates the forward fold, what may limit the forward fold, and how the effect gravity has on us when we're doing a forward fold. It will affect us. It will be different whether we're doing a forward standing fold from standing, from lying down on the back, or from a seated position. It's quite different, and usually the best way to learn forward folds is from a standing position, unless you have a herniated disc or something that causes you pain. So we are going to focus on it first from a standing position. So I want to help you find your hip joint, first of all. For many of us, we say bring hands to the hips, and they think, and this is the waist, so we want to bring our awareness to where the hip joint is. Think of a fulcrum, okay? You want a pivot point in a fulcrum. So if you were to take your hands to the top of your thigh, try to balance on one leg, raise the opposite knee, and feel where that crease is. And just take your hands to where that crease is, right in the middle of the crease. And you can bring your fingers here. And then you can soften your knees in case your hamstrings are tight. So to create the action, what creates the action is the pelvis tilting forward. So press these 2 points back and just hinge from here, keeping your back straight. And they just go halfway, you don't have to go far. You could take your hands to the thigh if you need to. And you might feel a bit of a stretch in the back of the leg. So what creates the forward fold is this action of pivoting at the hip joint like a fulcrum. What may limit it would be the muscles in the back of the body, so the back of the hamstrings, the calf, gastrocnemius, so all these different muscles in the back of the leg. And then when you come into a deeper forward fold, you might be also limited by lumbothoracic fascia, the low back. There are different things that might be affecting you in the back of the body. And then gently take your hands to the thighs and just gently come back up. So we're going to repeat that action. Soften knees, take fingers to the front of the hip joint. Soften your knees, press these 2 points back and hinge forward from your hips. And feel this for a moment. Keep the spine long. So at this point, we're not releasing the back, or the upper body, we're keeping it long and straight. Over time, that will change when you get enough range of motion. That will change. And then take hands to the thighs again and slowly come up. Okay, I'm going to do it one more time, just to get it into your neuromuscular, your memory. So we're going to soften the knees, take hands to the front of the hip joint, press these 2 points back and hinge. You might feel the sit bones lift up. You might feel the sit bones lift up and widen. And then we're going to take the hands to the thighs and gently come back up again. Okay, so when we're standing and we take the forward fold, gravity kind of helps us. As long as we fold from the hip joint, gravity is going to help bring us forward. When we're lying on the back, gravity is helping us by not giving us a force to kind of push against in our upper body, trying to support ourselves. It allows the back to relax. So when somebody has really tight hamstrings or low back injuries, it's advisable to learn forward folds actually lying on your back. So if you have a wall or a door jamb, some physical therapists or people will actually have you lie on the back with one knee bent or straight and the other leg up on a door jamb in the corner of a door. And so you can passively stretch this. So to explore how this feels lying down, or to look at this from a lying down perspective, again, we do want to fold forward from the hip joint. That's why I taught it first standing. Even though it's easier for your back to do it lying down, it's easier to understand the action of folding from the hip joint when you're standing up. So if I was to take a forward fold here, the same action applies. I want to fold from that hip point, from that pivot point in the hip joint. So there is a little bit of a natural curve in my low back. I'm not letting the pelvis tilt forward so much that I'm exaggerating that curve, but I'm also not trying to flatten it out. Some people will do that sometimes to really engage core, and I'm not saying it's always wrong. Sometimes it's effective for a certain reason, but for right now, for understanding forward folds specifically, allow there to be a little bit of a natural curve in the low back, and try to find the hip joint. You can bend the knees and even take your feet a little bit wider if you need to define that hip joint, and then work towards straightening the legs. Now, the hardest way to get into forward folds, where gravity is helping you the least, is when you're doing a seated forward fold. So if you're doing a seated forward fold, especially if you have hamstrings that are tight, it is highly recommended that you have your hips elevated. And the reason why is if you try to fold forward from that hip joint, that pivot point, and the hamstrings are really tight here and not letting you come forward, the release valve is tucking the pelvis under, the hamstrings will tuck the pelvis under, and then gravity's not working with you. Gravity wants to pull you back. So, I'm exaggerating it in many cases, but in some cases not. So, it's best to try it from a seated position, elevating your hips. You could even soften your knees again. Find that hip joint, and then try to pivot from there. And you might be not going very far at first, that's okay. And you try to keep your back straight. Now, with one caveat, if you have the range of motion in your hamstring and you get to about a 45-degree angle, you can start to release your back. You don't have to keep it straight the entire time. But in the beginning, you want to keep it straight so that you're really encouraging the hip, the motion to come from the hip joint and not the low back. Okay. So I hope you found that useful. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment or a question below. Thank you so much for joining me. Namaste.